Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. Hi, Matt. I want to read you something that's been attributed to Steve Bannon, who's been way out front this week since leaving the White House, sort of Bannon unplugged. This is from that Gabe Sherman piece, and it reports that several months ago, according to two sources with knowledge of the conversation, former chief strategist Steve Bannon told Trump that the risk to his presidency wasn't impeachment, but the 25th Amendment, the provision by which a majority of the cabinet can vote to remove the president. When Bannon mentioned the 25th Amendment, Trump said, "What's that?" According to a source, Bannon has told people he thinks Trump has only a 30% chance of making it the full term. What do you think the chances are of Trump making it a full term and a second term?
Every day's a new day, Nicole. They have a special counsel that's going through everyone's underwear drawer. I'm pretty confident that actually the underlying charges will be found to have been specious, but I'm sure there'll be some scattershot involved with this. I think President Trump has taken on the press, the swamp, the establishment, the Republican Party like nobody. He's taken on everything, and you get powerful enemies when you do that. So I do think he's got a lot of people shooting at him. I think there's a very, very, very high percentage chance that he finishes out his term. I also think there's a high percentage chance that as people attack him back pretty ruthlessly, that it actually helps him politically.
Well, Matt, I wasn't asking you about Russia or the special counsel. I was asking you about the 25th Amendment, which, based on my Google search, is something that the cabinet invokes. These aren't people that attack him. These are people that see him up close. So you've got Steve Bannon, who I think views himself as a close ally of CPAC, which you run, who says that Steve Bannon told Trump the risk to his presidency wasn't impeachment, but the 25th Amendment, the provision by which a majority of the cabinet, not the kinds of people you just talked about, can vote to remove the president. When Bannon mentioned the 25th Amendment, Trump said, "What's that?" Bannon has told people he thinks Trump has only a 30% chance. So I'd like you to respond to the fact that Steve
what
Bannon...
publication was that in?
It's in, it's a Gabe Sherman piece, but listen, I don't want to have a fight with you about the media, because I'm guessing you came on this network because you at least were generous enough to share your insights, but I want you to respond to Steve Bannon possibly warning the president that he's not the only one. There are plenty of reports out there. If you don't like Vanity Fair, I'll find you 12 others before the next break.
I'm a subscriber of Vanity Fair. I read it cover to cover, so all I would say is I know their point of view well. I talk to Steve Bannon often. Steve Bannon has never raised that with me. We have all kinds of conversations about politics. You're right, he's a close ally of CPAC. I have heard Steve talk about, with his typical gusto and passion, that this president is taking on so many powerful forces that, you know, the reverberation is going to be substantial. So I could see him talking in these apocalyptic terms that when you do this, you know, it can result in bad political options, but I don't think I have never heard him say that that's a viable option. I do think, look, he's at loggerheads even with some prominent Republicans, and this is the way Donald Trump's going to be president.
Do you think that Bob Corker's comments over the weekend in an interview with the New York Times are justified? And I know you have a lot of, we should just disclose to our viewers, your wife works in the White House. You and I both have a lot of friends in this White House.
And I just came from there, and I can guarantee you I saw nobody running around in panic, and I didn't see people with the razor blades out. Actually, it seemed like a pretty happy environment, I will tell you that.
Well, there's a lot of difference between stoicism and happiness, but I take your point. I wasn't just inside the White House. But Bob Corker has seen this president up close and personal. He said that he lacks the stability and competence for the job he has. He has talked about Tillerson and Mattis and Kelly being the only thing that stands between this president and chaos. And I wonder what your assessment is of the stability that the president has displayed in how he carries out foreign policy.
I think, you know, I obviously disagree with Bob Corker completely. I think his comments are petty. I think they're alarmist. Look,
you think it's petty to think that Donald Trump has displayed incompetence in attacking Tillerson and attacking Sessions? Do you think that those things display competence and stability?
I think Corker doesn't like the president, and I think he's gone public with it.
He doesn't like the president. He was one of the first people to endorse him. He was on the short list to be vice president. I mean, that's just not true.
I mean, he doesn't like the...
I think he doesn't like what he's seen.
This is my version of events, which is I don't think the president respects the president. I don't think he likes the president. I think he's gone public with his criticisms of the president. For conservatives like myself, we have long had problems with Bob Corker, including some of his actions around the whole background on the Iran nuclear deal. So, look, I fortunate. I don't like to see Republicans at each other's throats, but when it comes to this fight of Trump versus Corker, I'm firmly in Trump's camp, and I think Corker is acting in a way which has put him in this politically vulnerable position where he wouldn't be able to win if he ran for re-election, which is why he's not running.
But Trump did beg him to run once again last week. Jeremy Bash, let me ask you how destabilizing it is in national security circles to hear Donald Trump sort of weaponize and galvanize his supporters against the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Yeah, it was really amazing to me because I think fundamentally what Senator Corker, who is, with all respect, Matt, he is a serious foreign policy leader. He's the chairman, the Republican chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's no liberal. He's no Democrat. He's not a member of the media. He is someone of the president's party. And he has watched up close the way the president conducts foreign policy. And for him to give an assessment that the president is potentially leading us to World War III, I think everybody needs to take that extraordinarily seriously. It's also a case, I think, that he talks often to those three cabinet officials and cabinet-level officials that you referenced, that they are reflecting back to him the grave concern they have about the state of affairs.
Phil Rucker, I'm going to let you respond, Matt, but let me just let Phil Rucker give us a little bit of sort of your paper's most recent reporting about the chief of staff, and that it's become clear in the last 48 hours, I'd say, that he's more embattled than he appears. And the president obviously caught wind of this, I think put out a couple tweets in the last 12 hours saying, I love my chief of staff, and he's so happy here. Matt, you and I both know that is
no
not...
chief of staff is happy.
Oh, okay. That's a non-denial. That's why we're still friends. But Phil Rucker, can you share the latest reporting that the Post has its hands on about the state of John Kelly's grasp on this West Wing?
Yeah, well, look, I think I don't think fire him at any point soon. If anything, Trump wants to try to keep him on. But our understanding from reporting, from conversations with sources over the last few days, is that there remains some tension between these two men. They're very different individuals with very different styles of doing their work, and there have been friction points over the course of the last few months, and those friction points remain. And Kelly, it's a difficult job. It's an all-hands-on-deck job. There are a lot of crises that are going on around the world, and in this White House, and Kelly has to deal with that. And, Trump made a comment over the weekend that Kelly would be there for the full 7 years. I cannot imagine Kelly intends to be there for 7 years. I don't think any chief of staff can make it that long. We'll see if he makes it 7 months. I don't think a breakup is imminent here, according to the reporting we have, but there remain much more frustrations and tensions than Trump would let on publicly.
All right, we have to sneak in a break. Phil Rucker and Jeremy Bash are leaving.
He not only was blaming the Puerto Rican people, but he then creates this video which excludes what they had actually done, which is just amazing.
Matt Schlapp, I know how you feel about pylons, so I'm not going to defend all this, but I want to ask you a separate question. You and I worked for a president who was, in many instances, justifiably criticized for his response to Katrina. So you and I, in many regards, are the worst equipped to evaluate his response to Puerto Rico, okay? But let me just ask you what your advice would be to this White House for the president. Is this helpful, him putting out a video that edits out the part that gives the people of Puerto Rico some credit for helping themselves, something that obviously the president thinks the people of Puerto Rico need to do more of?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that when it comes down to what happened in Puerto Rico, quite honestly, what happened in the Virgin Islands, which is not getting near the coverage it needs as well, what happened in Texas, basically the government is rated on how they actually help people, and the federal government has a role to play, but as we all know, it's a limited role. It really comes down to some funding questions, using the National Guard, but it's that local government and the state government that plays a big role. And what the White House needs to do is simply continue to be a helping hand in the process to get these people in a better position. The problem is when you have this many people in desperate need of the basics of life, it can lead to very bad things, which is just, it's bad for that society, it's bad for our country. So my advice to them is just keep trying to help. It's frustrating. They're not going to get a break in the coverage on this. I don't know why we blame presidents for Mother Nature. It's kind of where this has gone. It's a little bit stupid, but I think presidents do have to be the consoler in chief, and they have to do everything they can to help people. My guess is the people on the ground appreciate the help when they get it.
You said something, I want to give you a chance to clear it. You said that society, and I mean, they're Americans, we're Americans. It is our...
What do you mean? I'm sorry, I must have missed...
I just want to make sure you weren't suggesting that somehow their problems, I mean, you're not suggesting that FEMA not do everything to rebuild Puerto Rico, to rebuild their grit. You weren't trying to...
No, maybe I've made a, maybe I need to look at the tape, but of course, Puerto Ricans are Americans. We should help the people who are in our territory, the Virgin Islands. We should help the people affected in Texas. I mean, there is a role to play, but my point is this, and you know this, Nicole, the federal government can only do so much when natural disaster hits. They can be a helping hand, they can facilitate, they can coordinate, but it's unfortunate that the politics has come down to this question of somehow it's a White House response to a storm that is the biggest impact. And it's not. There's things they can do, but they can't wave a magic wand and make everybody better again.
Well, Donald Trump, Harold Ford, has waved the hate stick at the mayor of San Juan. He has constantly attacked her for simply standing in front of the cameras and begging for help. I mean, he hasn't done what Matt just counseled him to do. He'd be wise to do so. But he has attacked the mayor of San Juan. He's popped rolls of paper towel. He talked about them being soft and luscious. I mean, his actions have not helped him.
No, then you had this
video. And they've
video.
definitely not helped the people of Puerto Rico.
I'd love to hear Matt. Maybe Matt couldn't see the video, but just react if this, to Susan's point, is this helpful in the process? But before he answers, one of the things that concerns me a lot about this president, and sort of where we're going with politics and the way people think about the federal government, I'm a strong believer, and I hope we all are, that when the federal government marshals its resources and marshals its determination and marshals its focus, there's very little it can't help solve. Now, I would agree you can't prevent a natural disaster, but I take issue with Matt and others that may make the point that there's only so much that the federal government can do. That is true, but when I don't believe, and perhaps Matt is not saying this, but I cannot believe we think as a nation that we're doing all that we can in Puerto Rico and in the Virgin Islands. And if we are, it says more about the ineptitude and ineffectiveness and frankly, not even incompetence, but just the inability of us as a people. And how does that project around the globe when the federal government helps citizens get water? And this is not another society. This is the United States of America.
Harold is way too polite to Matt, who I love. Love Matt Schlapp, love him. But the idea that what Donald Trump is being criticized for is for Mother Nature, which is what he said, is ridiculous. There were two huge natural disasters. One happened in Texas. One happened in Puerto Rico. The federal response to the disaster in Texas was competent, helpful, got a lot of boots on the ground, did a lot of good work. The one in Puerto Rico was a disaster.
Continues to be.
And continues to be a disaster.
Right.
So the disparity between the two of them and the underlying reasons for that is what a lot of people are criticizing. Matt, people are looking at Puerto Rico and saying, why is Puerto Rico getting a second, third, fourth, fifth fiddle kind of treatment compared to what Texas got? And again, you're not going to try to claim to me that they've gotten equal treatment or that the federal governor's response has been in any way competent around how it's dealt with Puerto Rico.
Matt, you got 20 seconds.
I love you back, but the fact is what we learned with Katrina, with Governor Blanco, is that when you have incompetent state and local government when a storm hits, you're in a bad spot. I actually think the governor of Texas did a magnificent job, and I do think that what we saw on the island, if you talk to former Governor Luis Fortuno and other political leaders who have been involved in Puerto Rico, you do have a problem with the fact that you did have some mayors and some local response, especially in San Juan, that was quite poor. And that's the problem when these storms hit. We want to federalize and nationalize everything. We think the White House can solve all of our problems.
Matt, we don't want to nationalize everything, but when people are begging for their lives, it's not the right time for the President of the United States to trash talk them on Twitter. That's going to have to be the last word. When you get your own show here, you can get the last